Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today, City Council Member Lillian Hunter. Welcome back.
Good morning, Randy. It's nice to be back.
It's been a while. You should have been here one more time last year, but you hurt yourself. But you're all better now, right?
Yeah, I took the grand fall and suffered the consequences, but I'm back in action now, stronger than ever.
You were the disembodied voice of Councilmember Hunter at council meetings. You were actually calling into council meetings for a period of time. I remember that, and because that doesn't happen very often, but it's nice that the council accommodates that for council members who won't want to be there. But so everything's better. You're up and around, and
yes, I'm a benefactor of modern medicine. Okay, very appreciative of that, and also a benefactor of support of colleagues and friends. So all good.
And I know that had to be frustrating for you to be laid up, because I know how, because a citywide council member like you are, you visit every square inch of the city on issues and things that you're interested in, and meeting with constituents and a variety of things. So not being able to do that for a period of weeks probably was very frustrating.
Yes, that's putting it mildly. But the good part to that is I figured out that I didn't have a choice in the matter, and so I started inviting people to come to me. And so I didn't, while I wasn't able to physically be present in many of those areas or visit those sites then, I was able to meet with individuals and constituents and keep that contact going at a different level. And then afterwards, now I'm able to catch up with that and make those site visits, as you just alluded to.
All right, great. And so now we're in a very busy time. You're here at a very propitious moment, because this is a very busy time for the City Council. There's some big policy stuff on your agenda right now that you're working your way through. Not only, and then last year was also a very big policy thing on landlord-tenant rights, which took a long time. But kind of ancillary to that now is this whole issue of accessory dwelling units, which Tacoma used to have. I don't know if I've told you this story, but when we both grew up in South Tacoma years ago, there was an ADU on the block I lived on Oak Street, where one of my friends in my neighborhood, his grandmother lived in the house behind his house. And I thought that was the greatest thing in the world, because he could see his grandma whenever he wanted, and we went over to her house and got cookies, at times. I had to wait for my parents to drive me to my grandma's house, who lived in the South End. So I thought having grandma behind the house was a great thing. And then that went away for a while, and now it's the in thing. Even the legislature's talking about accessory dwelling units now.
That is all correct, and I'll just point out that Tacoma started talking about accessory dwelling units before the legislature did. So once again, Tacoma leads the way.
Right.
And accessory dwelling units, done right, done for the right reasons, are wonderful. And you just gave a perfect example of how that can benefit a family, keeping family intact, and also helping our populations that live a little bit more independently but can't live as independently as they did in their younger years. So we've crafted policy that has been a long time coming. It has not been capricious by any stretch of the imagination. The Planning Commission's been working on this for over a year. There have been multiple public hearings, testimony, recommendations made to the IPS Committee, Infrastructure Planning
and Sustainability
Committee. Got sent back to the Planning Commission, moved forward, and now it's moved in front of the council. So we've had our public hearings at the council level, and we're looking to make a final decision or approve that policy a week from today.
Now, I have to be fair. Things have changed, certainly, since the time I was growing up on Oak Street and my friend's grandmother lived behind him. There was no such thing back then as Airbnb. And that is an issue. That is a legitimate concern that it comes up in community after community across the state and across the nation, if you follow urban issues like I do online. Because there is a thing called Airbnb, and people love being able to rent out their units to as a money-making proposition to bolster their income. Fine. And gets visitors to our community. Cities have a different kind of relationship with Airbnb, because it, of course, avoids hotel taxes and things like that. But nevertheless, that's a separate issue. But so that wasn't a factor in the 60s when the city used to allow ADUs and then got away from that. Now considering it, that is something you've had to consider this time around, right?
That's correct. And we like to refer to them as bare G&G, so that we don't give any free press to any endeavors on that, also known as short-term rentals. And my colleague, Catherine Ushka, ran an amendment amendment last week that specifically states that anybody who's going to use an accessory dwelling unit for a short-term rental, 30 days or less, there needs to be owner-occupied of one of the units on the property. So if someone goes that direction, there's going to be owner on-site management of that. Again, just running some interference in that because we don't know, in all of the accessory dwelling unit policy, there's some of it, we've planned it strategically, we're launching it, and we have to see what happens. So Catherine Ushka's amendment was very good. If indeed it's going to be short-term rentals, we want to make sure that there is an owner on the property, on the site, so that it's just not a free-for-all of people coming and going. I also ran an amendment which has to do with accountability, where in 12 months we're going to take a look at what's really happening, how many permits were issued, what are the size of these units, who's renting them, are they long-term rentals, short-term rentals, are they affordable rentals? And we're going to do that at 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, and 6 years. We want to make sure that we're getting what we intended when we passed this policy. So it's been very well vetted. We've paid attention to the detail. We've crafted good policy here. And as we move forward, we're going to monitor that to make sure that it's working. And if it's not, we're going to run an early intervention on that. If something becomes problematic, or the nightmare that some people are envisioning is going to happen in their neighborhoods with approval of ADUs, then we can address that at the time. And it's not the type of thing where we are approving this major policy that can affect all the neighborhoods in Tacoma and then not paying attention to what happens as a result of that.
Gee, what a concept. Policymakers doing a check on whether their policy is working as intended.
That's called accountability.
Yeah,
what a concept.
Because usually people kind of go, okay, we solved that problem.
Yeah.
Let's go do the next
Here's
one.
our policy. We passed it. You're liking it.
Yeah.
No, we're going to be very careful and thoughtful, not only in how we crafted the policy, but how the policy is implemented and what the impacts are in our communities.
All right. Well, another big issue that's been around for a bit and now is kind of coming to a head is the fate of Click Network.
Yes.
The city's innovative, creative attempt a few years ago to become America's most wired city with an alternative provider to cable TV. And also, by the way, here's this little internet thing that you can get some internet service as well on these same cables. And as much as this is the same story, this is kind of history repeating itself because, Tacoma bought the old Tacoma Water Company. The city of Tacoma bought the old Tacoma Water Company because a city ought to control the water source that its residents use. They did that over 120 years ago. And then along with that water utility came this little tiny electric utility thing that the owners had dabbled in. They'd created a little dam somewhere and they generated some electricity. So the little thing grew into Tacoma Power now, right. But that wasn't what you bought. You bought the water utility. That was the important thing at the time. Same kind of thing happened here with Click. I mean, we created Click for cable TV, and the internet sort of came along. But now the internet is the actual real value here, and cable TV is one of many ways people can get TV entertainment these days. Whereas when it was created, it was not. There was just kind of basically over-the-air antennas and cable TV. So here we are in another make or break moment for Click. The big decision first was whether to do this or not, and there was certainly some competition that was unhappy with the City Council's decision to go ahead at that point in time. There was a lot of community discussion and angst and support. You're kind of in the same spot right now, right? About the future of Click, and there's angst, there's support, and
lots of discussion. So all of that is correct, and we remember the Tacoma being the most wired city. This bold investment that the city made for the purposes of laying down the cable that allowed us to have cable TV and this little thing called the internet. So that grew highly successful in its day, in its launch. And I think along the way, we just sort of lost sight of what was really happening, making some assumptions about the maintenance of that utility and the value of that utility. We fast forward 25 years and the dynamic had changed with regard to the cable TV industry became secondary, internet became primary on that, and then what was the city going to do? What was the future of Click? Just a brief history here. And it really boiled down to, was this part of the city's business? And then there are also the fiscal considerations there. And depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a different spin on the fiscal viability of that. But what we can't dispute is that we have an asset there that's city-owned that is going to continue to be city-owned. So how do we craft policy and chart a course moving forward that leverages all of the attributes to that asset? And so what we are doing, and where we're at right now, we brought in Joanne Hovis, who is a nationally known expert on internet, cable, and these types of things, to evaluate, assess what can we do as a city if we manage, operate it, what can we do if we own the asset, and then we have someone come in who provides the services for us. That's where we're at now. We have narrowed it down to two entities that have done proposals with how the internet service is going to look in Tacoma moving forward. What that also includes is that they are taking on a commitment for an aging infrastructure that hasn't been maintained to the level that it should have been maintained. We're looking at $10 to $20 million of investment that these providers are willing to do. So we're preserving Click. We are upgrading with the providers' support there, that we're going to have a state-of-the-art service that continues. And the other piece to that is that cable TV is still going to be a part of that. It won't be the driver, it will be the nice to have now as opposed to the need to have, which is what internet services are. So I'm looking forward to the next steps. And again, we need to be bold. We need to look at all of the information. It's been very thoughtful. It's been very well vetted. And whatever decision we make as we move forward, there's going to be that accountability piece in there, as I mentioned earlier with the ADUs. Did we get what we intended? Is it working? Is it affordable? Is it reliable? And is it citywide, making sure that all of our constituents have access to quality internet services?
Now, we certainly, I think, agree that I don't think there's any disagreement this next statement, which is the internet has sort of become as an essential part of a utility function, for lack of a better word, as water, as electricity, as sewage, as stormwater, as refuse collection. It's an essential of urban living these days. There's so much that is actually done on the internet. And one way of the government being involved in it is maybe assuring that everybody can benefit from that, because that's the other thing of a utility. A utility works for everyone in the city, regardless of their station in life or their income or whether they graduated from a school or didn't graduate from a school. I mean, the electricity works for all of them as long as they pay their bill. Right. And we even have programs to help with that sometimes. The internet has become kind of like that. I mean, it is now the access to banking for a lot of places. In some parts of the world, it is the way you access banking. So is that one of the things you're hoping to preserve here, is that to make sure that whatever we do in terms of the management and running of Click is that it actually does a better job than it has done in the past of being as important as turning on the switch and getting your lights to come on and turning the faucet and having your water come out?
Well, that isn't something that we hope for. That is something that we intend to have happen.
Okay.
That is not a casual, gee, it'd be nice if everybody has equitable access to internet services. No, that is our intention, that not only will they, across all of our neighborhoods, the same speed, same capacity, that yes, all of our citizens, all of our constituents and residents have access to that. The other piece to it is when you said, as long as you pay your bill, we want to make sure that the internet is affordable as well, because we look at costs even for our utilities, everything's getting more expensive. We have a large number of our residents and our citizens who are on fixed incomes, and we want to make sure that all of those amenities and utilities and the necessities are available to them and is affordable across the city with different programs, different rates, and also supplemental programs to help pay for that.
Okay, so that is a good part of what you're trying to do. And I would just also want to ask, because it occurs to me that there's some models here that this isn't unique for Click that we're talking about. The city has other assets that it it trusts other people to manage for it. Now, the city manages some of its own assets very, very well, but there are other types of maybe specialty assets that the city has chosen, like say the Broadway Theater District, the various buildings that the city owns, the Pantages, the Rialto, Theater on the Square, the Armory. Those facilities are all owned by the city, but they're managed by an organization now called Tacoma Arts Alive.
Tacoma Arts Alive used to be the Broadway Center for Performing Arts.
The picture right here, the Foss Waterway, this property was all purchased by the city, but it's managed by a nonprofit organization called the Foss Waterway Development Authority, not by the city itself.
So the city can't be all things to all people, if you're familiar with that cliche. At some point, they're all true. So we bring in the subject area experts. And let's go back to the theater district. Many people have availed themselves to the recently remodeled Pantages Theater. Fabulous, beautiful. City owns that. The Broadway Center for Performing Arts, now Tacoma Arts Alive. Raised money for that, was the driver behind that remodel, so that we have a big city metropolitan that can hold its own against any other city performing center. Some people enjoyed Spamalot over the weekend.
That's right.
So if you were in there and you enjoyed that, or you go to any of the amenities there, you look around, and this is a perfect example of a very valuable asset that the city owns, that with a really well-articulated contract is managed by a private entity, or in this case, a nonprofit entity. We've had great success with that. And what the reality is with that is that with Tacoma Arts Alive, the Broadway Center for Performing Arts, they are the subject area experts. They know what they're doing. They know what's going on in other cities. They do that research. They bring the venues in, and they do it very well. And they do it better than the city would be doing it. Although we certainly monitor that and pay close attention to it. That's a very well-articulated, finely tuned partnership that benefits everybody.
The equivalent in the case of Click of the buildings in the Broadway Center or Tacoma Arts Alive, or the property here on the Foss Waterway, the asset is the fiber.
Yes.
The miles and miles of fiber optic cable that are underneath the streets and sometimes on the poles overhead. But that's what's owned by the government. That's
Yes.
the city's asset.
It is.
And has extraordinary value, and will continue to be owned by the city regardless of whether this deal goes forward or not.
Absolutely. Right. And as we were going through this process in the past year, we had 3 promising candidates that could possibly have been, or that had put in a proposal to partner with us. One of those candidates wanted to take possession of that cable. They didn't want to partner with us. They wanted it. And that automatically put them out of the running. The proposal was very good, but they were very clear that they wanted to own that cable and have control of that. We were not willing to let that go. We are still not willing to let that go. So I think as people are looking at Click and what is happening, we want to save our Click. We want to save Click too, and this is a viable way for us to do that. It doesn't mean that we're giving away the farm, we're giving away our asset, or we're selling it off. We are going into a highly structured partnership that benefits all the parties involved, including the city, including the residents, and also the provider who's going to be managing those services for us.
All right. I know there's another issue that you're very keen on, and I want to spend some time on this because it's been so long since you've been here, and that is workforce development.
Yes.
And that is the ability to provide Tacoma, which does lag behind other parts of the Puget Sound region in terms of job opportunities and incomes and access to jobs that other parts of the region might have. So that is a very important issue here. We've had a long-standing relationship with a workforce development organization here, but your interest is even beyond that, right?
Well, the issues that we face as a city are not unique to Tacoma. And if we look at people experience homelessness, we look at the difficulty people have in affording their to be able to afford decent housing. Number of those issues. We react to those issues as we should and is our responsibility. I'd like to start looking at it from a proactive, how do we get people in a better position so that we move them away from the precipice of going into experiencing homelessness? How do we help people afford their housing. And certainly we can build more units, we can make those units affordable and move forward in that endeavor, and we will continue to do so. But within the population that's struggling there, we have people who work hard, but they are underemployed. They're working at jobs that are at minimum wage. Those are jobs that aren't stable, or maybe they're not working at all. Or perhaps because of some bad decisions made as a teenager, my former crew there, they didn't get their high school diploma. How do we put structures into place that help those people move themselves to a better position? And with that, how do they get their high school diplomas if that's necessary? How do they get the training? How do they move themselves up the income earning ladder? And I'll just give an example. If you're at minimum wage job, say, let's just say $12 an hour, and you get access to some training, much of which is an apprenticeship, which coincides with getting paid while you're learning your craft, and you move from $12 an hour to $22 an hour, which is oftentimes a starting wage with benefits in some of our trades programs. $10 an hour, 8 hours a day, $80 a week, $400 a week, or $80 a day, $400 a week, and you get to the end of the month, that's $1,600. That's just to start. Suddenly things become a little bit more affordable. And as people learn those skills and the crafts, and they move up in those trades and perhaps get a journeyman's card, and they start to make $10 more an hour, $15 more an hour, $20 more an hour. It adds up. Now we get people to where they have a little bit more control over their lives, where they're living, what they can afford, and perhaps line people up to get into home ownership, which is one of the fastest ways to earn personal wealth. We have right now in the city of Tacoma jobs down on Port of Tacoma. There's hundreds at any given time. And these employers are struggling to fill those jobs because they don't have people who have the basic skills training. At the same time, we have a large group of people who are struggling to make ends meet. How do we get those two connected, and how do we bridge that? And that's where the workforce development and being proactive comes in. Workforce Central has been very deliberate and intentional with identifying how many people in Pierce County meet the description of don't have a high school diploma, aren't employed, or they're on a gig economy, low-paying jobs, and they're not in school to get skills training. In Pierce County alone, there's about 47,000 people who meet that description. It's staggering. And these aren't people who can't or won't. It's how do we help them figure out how to bridge to get into those good jobs. So I think that's very worthwhile work. I did that for my career for 35 years in public education. And I think we need to, as a city, not necessarily be the people who offer that, but we need to help orchestrate that, build those partnerships so that we can facilitate that and streamline people into those trainings and into those jobs and into a better quality of life.
Okay, and so 47,000 that we don't know off that number, that was Pierce County. How many of those are within the city of Tacoma? But do we have a guess? Or
I don't have a guess for that, but
let's say we're 25% of the overall population in Pierce County, but let's say we're a third maybe of those numbers. That's still that's a staggering.
It's a staggering amount. And when we look at people who are experiencing homelessness, and it just seems to be that we can't make a dent in that endeavor. And I've had constituents call me up saying, well, they're being bussed in from Arizona. No, if we've got 45,000 plus in Pierce County, we're growing that population right here. We need to run an interference on that and start providing some options there that's proactive, and not make the assumption that because someone's experiencing homelessness or someone's struggling to meet their rent right now, that means that they always will be. In public education, we're very determined to break the cycle of poverty. That continues after people leave the K-12 system, and I think it's important and imperative that we take that on as one of our endeavors with the city, as a city.
You mentioned how part of this relates to affordable housing, and this is certainly something that Mayor Woodard has talked about a lot.
Yes.
She and the county executive have formed kind of a group of folks to talk about the affordable housing component of homelessness and what it deals, how the two are related. And certainly that's something, my work, the legislature, there are dozens and dozens of bills dealing with homelessness and affordable housing this year. conceivable idea someone's ever had has probably been introduced in a bill, most of which are still alive in this session. So there's a lot of people paying attention to this issue right now, and certainly in this region we ought to be, given that the problem has become on everybody's minds because it's grown to the point that it's become visible. Usually there's always homelessness, but it's usually at a lower level and people don't see it, and so they don't react to it. But now it's become visible and everyone's talking about it, and everyone's got ideas about how to do it. I'm actually, as a city employee and a city resident, proud of Tacoma's approach. I mean, establishing the stability site, I know it hasn't worked out exactly the way we intended when we created it, but it was an act of compassion to do it, and it was an act of boldness to do it. And maybe the follow-up steps haven't quite happened. Like, we haven't found the supportive housing that we thought we would be able to find as quickly as we were able to. But nevertheless, it's still a better place for folks who are experiencing homelessness to be than some of the other places we've seen them at. So I mean, I think the city's been out front, up and bold about how it's approached this issue, but that doesn't mean we need to sit back and say how proud we are of ourselves and give up from there. I mean, there's still a lot more to do, isn't there?
And there will be more to do for a very long time. So we didn't turn a blind eye to it, and we took action and had some success. There's also some things to be desired. And again, this goes back to the accountability piece. Did we get what we intended when we passed the policy, or when those policies were passed before my tenure on the council? But one of the things I also want to share is that we have a compassionate city. We have people who live in Tacoma that wonder what they can do about homelessness. And certainly, if you contribute to the food bank, that helps. If you have blankets, drive for people who experience homelessness, that's helpful. But one of the things that, if you really want to impact the specter of homelessness, start supporting your local schools. Making sure that every kid that's in high school and in school gets across that finish line at graduation. So can you volunteer? Can you support your school district? Can you help mentor and get those kids across? Because what we know is that within the population that's experiencing homelessness, the lack of a high school diploma is prevalent. If you don't get your high school diploma, you're almost guaranteed that your life's going to be a train wreck at some point with what our current dynamic and economy expects. So with all of those good intentions, if I can take this as in my bully pulpit here, help get students through the school system, get that diploma, and have a plan of where they're going to go. And that's something everyone can do. You know someone who might be struggling in school, you might know somebody who's dropped out, or some high school kid that's taking care of his or her siblings. Help that kid get across the stage. I can't express to you how important that is on putting a dent into our future homelessness population.
That's a great place to end, and we do have to end right now, but
Okay.
Thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks.
Our guest has been City Council member Lillian Hunter. We welcome you back next time here on Inside Tacoma.